We are going to do a fresh install of CentOS 7 as a virtual machine under the VMware hypervisor. So I have already booted off the install disk, and I could test the media first before installation, but I have already done that, so I will save you the time and just go directly to the install, the top option. Notice I could also pick troubleshooting, which would let me use the install disk as a repair and rescue disk, but let's just do the install. So the first step in the install is the initial boot, which takes some time because it has to discover all the hardware and configure various device drivers for it. I will pause for a second to save you some time of not watching anything interesting. So now it is finding all the equipment and it's starting. And the first thing it will do is ask me to make some basic choices, such as what language to use. I will later have the chance to change the language for an individual user, but this is the system as a whole. So here I'll just say English. And I will reset my time zone to be the one where I actually am, which is Central Time in North America. So let me do that. This unfortunately doesn't have enough information to show everything at the default resolution, so let me scroll down a little bit. Let me set up the network. I want the network to be on automatically. For some reason CentOS 7 doesn't really do that. And I'll set the host name to be CentOS or anything else I would like. So I'm done there. For software selection here, I will quickly just pick GNOME Desktop. I could go through all these menu choices and tune things up quite a bit, but I can always do that later, and here we want to save time. So I'll click on Done. And then the last thing I need to set really is the installation destination. That's the hard disk. I have a 30 gigabyte VMware disk set up. And then I have to scroll down a little bit here, but first let's just pick that, and then let me go back to that, and I have to actually set up my partitioning. So here I will say I will configure partitioning. I won't take the automatic choices, and then I have to click on here, full disk summary and bootloader. So I'll pick that, okay, and I'll say yes, so close. And then if I click on it again, I get this screen which lets me do manual partitioning. It can be a little tricky to get to this screen. You may have to play around a little bit. The installation program really wants you just to do things automatically rather than make your own choices. But instead of choosing LVM for logical volume management, which is Red Hat's default or CentOS default, I will just say standard partition because it's a little bit simpler for the purposes of these course. And I'll have to make disk partition, so I'll say slash. And for desired capacity, I'll say 29 gigabytes. And then my remaining space, I'll hit the plus sign again here. I'll configure a swap, and I'll make that 1 gigabyte. And I'll add that mount point. So now all my space is essentially taken up. And for the partition type, for the regular one, the default now for Red Hat is XFS. I will keep it back to the older one, ext4. And I'll say done. So this was the most complicated part of the initial configuration. If you just want to take the default choices, could have gone boom, 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 and be done with it. Okay? So now I will begin the installation. And it wants me to set a root password. So I'll do that. And I have to type it a second time. And if you can read it on this terrible font down here, it says it's a weak password, and it really doesn't want to accept it. But since this is a disposable student machine, it will not be exposed really to the outside world, I'll accept it, and I'll just say done. And now I will have to set up a user. So we'll give that user the full name of LF student, and I'll name the account as student, and I'll set a password for it. And I could make this user the administrator, so it'll be a more like Ubuntu or Windows type setup, where we don't consciously use the root account except through sudo in the case of Ubuntu. But I'll take a more traditional Unix approach, and I'll just say done. Once again, it thinks I chose a weak password, so I'll just click done again. So now it's going to go through the long process of installing many packages, 1362. I'll spare you that long wait and hit pause and resume again when it's almost done. Now it says it's performing post-install setup tasks. This includes things like setting up any security features and setting up the bootloader, including grub. This actually takes quite a bit of time, so I will pause again. It has finished, and now it wants me to reboot, so I will just hit reboot. So this is our first reboot of the newly configured system. It gives me a choice between the installed in kernel or a rescue kernel, so we'll just leave it alone and take the default. And it will take its time. The first time always takes a little bit longer to boot, and once it gets into a graphical display, it will ask me to make a couple of last minute choices. So first we're going to get the so-called greeter screen, and it's going to ask me to accept the license. And I will say sure, I'll accept the end user license associated with CentOS 7. And I'll just say finish configuration. So now I'll get the greeter screen, and it's just asking me to log in. So I'll give my password for the student account. And the first time this turns on, it will also say welcome and ask me to accept English. I will accept the standard English keyboard. I will turn off location services. I don't feel like being spied on at the moment. And I will not set up any online accounts that it's asking about. And we're done. And there's some introductory help that I will just dismiss. And that's what the default look is of a fresh install of a CentOS 7 workstation. Notice VMware will let me increase the screen display resolution by simply dragging rather than having to set a specific value, so that's rather nice. So that's what the initial bare bones installation of CentOS 7 looks like.